Keppel Auditorium on the campus of Catawba College, and particularly to those who are joining us online, to the first event of the college's 2025-26 Speakers and Artists Series. I'm Dr. Michael Bitzer. I'm a professor of politics and history, and also the director of the Center for North Carolina Politics and Public Service, which, in conjunction with Catawba's Center for the Environment, the Lilly Center for Vocation and Values, and the First Year Experience, are pleased to host tonight's event. We have a very special guest with us who brings together what we think of as the key ideals that Catawba centers itself upon: the pillars of scholarship with character and culture for service. And our journey here this evening began when 3 Catawba faculty members were tasked with seeking out a common summer reading for the incoming class of 2028 within the first year experience and for the various seminar classes that entering first year students take here at Catawba. They settled on a piece published in the Bitter Southerner, a publication based in Athens, Georgia, quote, that connects an activated and vocal global community working to make the South and America a better place. That article, published in November of 2024, is entitled Black Earth, which profiles Patrick Brown and his family's work in Warren County, North Carolina, about 2.5 hours northeast of where we are this evening. Rick brings to his vocation and life's work a sense of learning, of innovation, and adaptation, all forms of scholarship, understanding the discovery of new and innovative means for farming, particularly ones that address climate change. Notably, one approach has been through the planting and harvesting of hemp, where 1 acre of hemp would sequester or capture and store as much carbon dioxide as would a pine tree. But that pine tree would take over 20 years to do so, whereas the 1 acre of hemp would only take around 3 months to sequester the same amount of carbon. He brings a sense of character, that of, and again, this is from the article, quote, being a good steward of the land, caring for the community, being a good business person, and comes by this through his father's work and influence as a farmer and a pastor. It was his father who helped to ignite the environmental justice movement in the United States to tackle environmental racism that directly impacted Warren County in the 1970s and 80s. He has defined his community's and family's culture through 2 acts. First, of regeneration, which is one of the topics of his address tonight before a question and answer session, and second, of reclamation, by not just working for the nonprofit Nature for Justice, which helps communities at the forefront of the climate crisis work towards viable solutions, but by carrying out, again, noted in the article, quote, the ultimate act of reclamation, that of purchasing the plantation house and surrounding land where his great-grandfather had been enslaved. And Rick defines the principle of service by not just working with fellow farmers of color to transition from pesticide-dependent crops towards more earth-friendly organic and regenerative methods, but by having also worked in Afghanistan as a contract agricultural advisor, working in villages, teaching residents to grow grapes instead of poppies. Rick's life story truly represents the ideals of Catawba College and the 3 centers here on campus. of bringing a life's vocation and values through his character, of providing guidance in promoting and protecting the culture of our natural world, and through his tireless service to his community, his profession, and to our state. For his efforts, Rick was recognized last year as the 2024 North Carolina Small Farmer of the Year by North Carolina Agriculture and Technical State University. Following his presentation, Rick will be joined by the Executive Director of our Center of the Environment and Vice President for Sustainability and Chief Sustainability Officer for the college, Lee Ball. Please join me in giving a warm Catawba welcome to our honored guest, Patrick Brown.
Thank you for being here today. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's very exciting to have spent the entire day here at Catawba College. Very welcoming and very hospitable, and I definitely appreciate that. Today, we want to talk about some defining issues, some of the things that minority farmers have faced through decades, actually, which are barriers in agriculture. As mentioned, I'm a fourth generation minority farmer out of Warren County, North Carolina. I currently farm commodities as well as produce in 3 counties, Vance, Warren, and Franklin. And we have been regenerating those acres now for the last 10 years, focusing on inputs to the soil that help build microdiversity, microbial fungi, and creating paths for the environment through carbon sequestration. As mentioned, the fourth generation farm makeup are considered from enslavement of my great-grandfather Byron C. Brown, who was enslaved at the Oakley Grove Plantation from his birth to the end of the Civil War in 1865. Byron was able to transition from the Oakley Grove Plantation to another farm where he was a sharecropper in exchange for shelter, and he was able to be willed a portion of that land, which we now currently farm. My grandfather, Grover C. Brown, was born amongst 8 siblings, and he was able to farm the same cultivar and introduce fruit and vegetables to livestock. And from that point, my father, Reverend Dr. A. Brown, cultivated and worked on the land up until his death in 2023. And I was born into farming in 1982. I left the farm when I was 18. I had been farming alongside my father in tobacco production, which is what clothed and fed us as a cash crop. And I farmed until it was time for me to go to college. At the age of 18, I attended Fayetteville State University in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is a small historical black college where I played collegiate football up until my graduation. When I graduated in 2005, I decided that I did not want to just focus on farming again full time. I wanted to find my own path, just like my dad did and his siblings, and that was to move to Washington, D.C. And I started a career in the federal government, first as a contractor, as mentioned, where I was able to travel the world, and then I became a full government employee with the Defense Intelligence Agency, where I worked for 20 years. While working at the Defense Intelligence Agency in Washington, D.C., I was able to travel through various areas of the world, live in village stability platforms amongst various villages, specifically in the Middle East. And I was able to utilize some of the things that my father taught me into teaching others of our Western world of agricultural cultivation. When I decided to leave the federal government, while I was there, I was farming part-time. I would travel back and forth from Washington, D.C. to Warren County, North Carolina, after working 5 days a week and working on the weekends, managing the farm that my dad had passed on to me. We stopped growing tobacco in 2017. What we know about tobacco cultivation is there's a lot of herbicides and pesticides that are utilized in the production of that crop. And what we saw, or what I saw over the years of working part-time and still trying to manage a tobacco farm up until 2017, was that the soil had been depleted. And there was a time that something had to change. And I sat down with my mother and I talked to her about what she thought about industrial hemp and all the research that I had been doing while working for the government and seeing the medicinal aspects. And at that time, veteran suicide was a high-level interest during the time that I was researching. And I saw how much the Department of Defense had invested in the research of medicinal cannabis and how that could help overcome some of the traumatic suicide that some of the veterans were facing. And I knew that if the federal government was investing in so much money in the Department of Defense, that it had to be also something there outside of just medicinal aspects of cannabis. So I started to research fiber and herd products that are originated from industrial cannabis plant. And what I came across was that during World War II, 90% of the textile that was used for defense, military defense systems like, or components like parachutes were made from the industrial hemp fiber textile. And during the World War II, 90% of the textile contracts in the U.S. were government contracts to the U.S. Army. And so I knew at that point that this same textile that could be utilized for those type of ropes and textile components could also be utilized for our manufacturing industry and building components. So at that time, around 2017, I was growing industrial hemp CBD because there was not a supply chain for the textile industry. And so what I wanted to do was to figure out a way that if I could just at least grow the CBD medicinal plant, then I can eventually convince a manufacturing industry to get into decortication. And so from 2017 to 2020, we grew industrial hemp CBD, and then in 2020, we started to grow the fiber plant. The soil crisis and why I chose to mitigate that soil with industrial hemp was because, of course, the soil contamination. That included PFAS, or forever chemicals, such as glyphosate, that was leaching into some of the natural streams in our area, as well as some of the sludge waste by companies like Novazine out of Franklin County, North Carolina, that utilize sludge waste for synthetic fertility of nitrogen and phosphorus. And what we also know by doing the soil analysis was the high level of zinc that was in the soil created by some of the PFAS chemicals that had been utilized over the years. The high levels of zinc hinder soil fertility, but the industrial hemp provided the soil, the industrial hemp root system remediates soil with its deep roots, high levels of biomass during harvesting, and is used to remove harsh pollutants. The industrial hemp helped to absorb PFAS as well as heavy metals. The next couple slides, we're going to take a look at the overview of that component, the current economic state of the U.S. agriculture, challenges for small farmers and mid-sized farmers like myself, and what climate-smart and regenerative agriculture looks like, along with the opportunities for future directions and the roles that private sector, academia, and philanthropy play in the landscape of current agriculture systems. The current state of U.S. agriculture is a very volatile market in commodity structure, as well as the heavy increase of input costs. The inflationary pressures on farm operations are very drastic, and consolidation favoring large-scale farm producers are causing them to either diversify or go out of business, while the small and mid-sized farms are continuously under heavy financial strain due to banks and lending institutions not willing to lend. The persistent inequities for minority and undeserved farmers are as high as they were during the years of Piedmont versus Glickman, 1 and 2 on the U.S. Supreme Court. The deportations and farm labor are causing immigrant labor within 50 to 73% of U.S. farm workers to not be willing to show up for work. The deportations are shrinking the labor pool, and those direct impacts equal unharvested crops, higher labor costs, and financial losses. The ripple effect continues to delay harvesting, reduces planting, and it continues to increase food prices. The USDA estimates that lower labor shortages cost growers $3 billion annually. Mechanization adoption limited by capital for small and mid-sized farms that rely on labor but can't afford automated harvesting or planting equipment. There is a disease risk. We have heard so much about bird flu outbreaks, but currently we're not hearing about any of them, while there continue to be a continued havoc on our poultry industry and also increasing the poultry and egg prices. We now have a screwworm epidemic, which can be devastating for the cattle, which is causing the screwworm epidemic is causing a reintroduction, primarily from South America to North America. The labor shortages are worsening, while we cannot monitor or contain these outbreaks due to not having the public health available or the research that was once there, that now the government is choosing to lay off. Farm worker shortages strain disease prevention as well, because you don't have the proper technical farm assistance there to monitor potential outbreaks. We are in an agriculture recession. High input costs, depressed commodity prices, rising farm debt, declining net farm income, trade uncertainty, and high interest rates. Small, mid-sized farms are the most vulnerable. Less equity, less reserves, while the rise in farm bankruptcies, foreclosures, and consolidation continue to accelerate. Small and mid-sized farm challenges. The small, diversified small farm that averages a revenue of $350,000 or less is 86% of all farms in the U.S. and equivalent to 17% of production value. The small farm is primarily where the most healthiest food comes from, your natural, organic product. The mid-sized farm that has an average revenue of $350,000 or more is equivalent to 6% of farms in the U.S. and 18% of production value. The large-scale farms, the corporate farm that generates over $1 million a year in revenue, is 4% of farms, 4% of farms in the U.S. and 48% of production value, with high levels of GMO products. Farm numbers total dropped 7% in 5 years, with small, black-owned farms hit the hardest. New and beginning farm producers, or the next gen, is 30% of all producers, which currently, right now, average age of 47 to 58 versus 58 overall. Limited access to credit, capital, and land, increased volatility in market prices, rising input costs, and sudden supply chain disruptions. Federal support disparities, only 40% of the subsidy dollars actually go to small farmers, meaning that if the farmers don't farm enough acreage, they don't qualify for the subsidies versus the corporate farms that farms 1,000 acres or more. And of course, the tariff and trade disruptions hit small farms the hardest as well. Rollbacks in federal grants and conservation programs. For example, the Climate Smart Commodities Grant project that was eliminated in April of 2025 was one of the most supported conservation grants available to small farmers, which is no longer available. Inflation pressures on farm operations, small and mid-sized farms under increasing financial strain, and persistent inequities for minority and underserved farmers, which is a term that's inexistent now under the current administration. And of course, the uncontrollable increase of climatic events is also a main challenge that small and mid-sized farmers face. Climate smart and regenerative agriculture. Practicing these programs benefit soil health, carbon sequestration, as well as water retention. The federal Partnerships and Climate Smart Commodity Program was $3.1 billion over 141 projects, and over 60,000 farms in the U.S. Benefited from these incentives, which are now canceled. The barriers are the upfront costs, the technical assistance, and the knowledge gaps that these producers will no longer receive. We're leaning on now the private sector, and such as companies like PepsiCo, Unilever, Nestle, General Mills, all investing in regenerative supply chains. Companies like Microsoft investing in regenerative farmland fund, such as the Farmland LP. The Farmland LP is the largest U.S. fund manager specializing in organic and regenerative farming. It covers over 18,000 acres throughout Washington, Oregon, and California. What are the opportunities ahead? The opportunities are expanding into new markets for regenerative products, for example, industrial hemp, sesame, and other specialty crops. Partnerships with farmers, corporations, academic institutions, philanthropy, and NGOs to bridge gaps left by federal rollbacks. We now must depend on local and regional food system investments in order to provide quality food to rural communities that are suffering from food insecurities. We must build resilience through diversification as well as innovation. The roles of the private sector, academia, and philanthropy. For example, in the private sector, Chipotle has invested over $5 million in farm investments. 47 million pounds of local produce was purchased in 2024 from Chipotle. Sweetgreen, their long-term small farmer partnership is continuing to grow, as well as Kobani, which has supported over 430 family farms. Academia, we have land grant institutions as well as private institutions that need to continue research, support extension, and programming for producers that are most in need. Our call to action, or my call to action, is support the small and mid-sized farm stands. If you have a local community-supported agriculture farm in your neighborhood, the best way to support that producer is to subscribe to fresh food or animal products or dairy products that can provide your family with a quality pallet per week upfront either a yearly subscription or a monthly subscription. Equitable access, innovation, and policy support are critical, as well as collaboration across sectors that will define the future of agriculture. Thank you.
All right. Rick, thank you so much, and thank you for being here today at Catawba College. We've just enjoyed having you. You spent a whole day with us, and you're really, really busy, and just appreciate your investment in us and our students. You spent a lot of time with our students, presented to a room full of students here, our first years, got to hear from you today, and sharing your story was really compelling. Would you mind, I wanted you to expand a little bit on your story. So you left the farm when you were 18, and you've come back, and you did a lot. You worked for the federal government, but today, in addition to your farm work, you're involved with a lot of other organizations, which you've shared with us. It's a really important part of your work. Can you share a little more about that?
Yes. So I chose.
Are you on here?
So what was important to me, what I call my second half of my career, is to primarily dedicate it to agriculture in some way, shape, or form, as well as advocate for the next generation of producers. Also, at the same time, being a liaison and a technical assistance provider for traditional farm operations. So my work with nonprofits is primarily to do exactly that. Also being on boards and being committed to the advocacy work. I'm a part of several NGO boards that focus on regenerative agriculture. Kiss the Ground is one which is prominent in the regenerative space, where we actually are putting monies in the hands of producers that are willing to transfer or rotate regenerative acres into their current operation. So that's very important to me, to be able to not only just work the land that I'm on, but be a bridge for others.
So your father and mother, I know, are really influential in your lives, and your father was part of the original environmental justice movement in Warren County when he literally laid down in front of trucks that were on their way to deliver PCBs to the landfill. Mm-hmm. But can you speak about your mother a little bit? She was an educator, a principal for over 11 years, and a lifelong educator, and you're an educator now as well. And how has she influenced you?
Yes, so my mother was in education all her life. She was a graduate of Livingston University here in Salisbury, North Carolina, as well as a graduate of North Carolina Central University. And she was a school teacher first, and then she became a school administrator, and then she was a principal, and then her last position was a SEMA director, Science, Education, Mathematics for NASA, up until her retirement. And so education has always been the foundation. Faith, education, perseverance, intestinal fortitude. I learned all those things from my mother and my father, but more so watching my dad than him actually speaking, the type of career into me. It was more so watching him and his dedication, but also in the background was a mother that made sure that I did all of my schoolwork, made sure that I was always at school, never missing school, and making sure that I went to college. That was her main thing. She was a science major, so science was her thing. And so I had the best of both worlds. They balanced out very well, and it helps me to be a better parent myself, because I know how important it is to not only have someone that's always praying for you, but also someone that's there making sure that they see you through. And so that was my mother, and I'm very appreciative of both of my parents, but my mother definitely played a big role in my life.
So you shared with us that when you worked for the federal government, that you spent time overseas in Afghanistan helping farmers there, and I can imagine you were like, here I am back on the farm again, and I was curious to ask, were there moments when you were literally in the weeds, working with them, helping them, when you're thinking back, okay, I can see myself back on my farm?
Yeah, so working in a field in Afghanistan and a field in the Western world of the U.S. is a lot different. There's completely no vegetation in Afghanistan at the time that I was there. So it was basically trying to help show a culture of people a different aspect of how to grow fruits primarily, and without them focusing on just poppy plants. And so the government invested our time to be there alongside the military, and it was a very risky job. I was a young kid that really had a point in life that I wanted to prove myself to be on my own, and it's something now that I think about. I was crazy in doing it, but it was worth it. It was worth it. I could not have gone through that path to end up where I ended up in my career. So that was like one of those moments that I could, check off my list of, doing something that meant a lot to people, and hopefully we made an impact on that culture to be able to carry on some of those agriculture techniques.
You must have been a few times. If only I was back home with all the water that we have back in eastern North Carolina, we can show you how to grow a fruit tree.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So why is it important for us to understand the historic and current challenges that black farmers, face today and have faced in the past?
Because it's a part of history. If we don't talk about it, then it could also repeat itself again, I always say. It's very important to understand, especially the times during the Pickford versus Glickman cases, where the U.S. government was identified as discriminatory practices against minority farmers, and some of the ways that farmers were discriminated upon. If another, next gen producer that's a minority that's trying to utilize those same programs, if those producers didn't go through that type of situation, then it'll continue to happen again. And I think it's just very important that we also understand how much land minority farmers were operating over the last 100 years in the U.S. compared to how much acreage is being operated now. It could really blow your mind to understand the makeup of acres that we have lost. And so it's also important that the offspring of that generation is able to get back to farming. I think it's very important as well.
You shared with us a lot of the barriers, but what do you think is one of the largest barriers facing black farmers right now today?
Capital. I think having the capital and heirs property is also another issue. There's a lot of miseducation on heirs property and how that is really preventing minority producers to expand their current operations.
So you've quickly become quite the expert in regenerative agriculture. I know we talked about this last night. It's really a lifelong practice. You learn something new every season. Mm-hmm. But when you come into rooms like this, or you're just meeting people in line at the store and they're chatting you up and asking you what you do, how do you define regenerative agriculture, just kind of for the people that really don't know much about it?
So my definition of regenerative agriculture is when you utilize all the natural additives in a landscape instead of using anything synthetic. You're also making sure that you are disturbing the soil to the least most that you could, utilizing conservation practices like incorporating vegetative plants in the fall to make sure that the ground has cover, or no-tilling and less disturbing the soil, or planting into green, or not utilizing harmful pesticides or herbicides, all these different types of conservation practices, and focusing on ecosystem, co-inhabitants for wildlife, planting trees that focus on carbon sequestration, trying to not expose greenhouse gas emissions, all these different aspects of what we call regenerative agriculture, but indigenous practices have been here for hundreds and hundreds of years. We have now just given it a name, a new name.
So I know you have friends that are conventional farmers, and do you speak with them about how, from your perspective, the regenerative approach is more resilient?
Yes. So we understand the conventional operation and how costly it is for a large-scale conventional farm to transition to regenerative. What we try to teach, and the approach that we try to incorporate to a conventional or traditional farm, is that you try to regenerate a certain amount of land and not all of the current operation, and try to test the soil to see the difference, and the agronomy and analysis of it each and every year, and utilize research plots to study the regenerative aspect and to monitor the yields. That convinces the conventional farmer that what they've been doing, there is other ways of doing it.
And you were talking about earlier today how your farm is thriving, and you're starting to see a lot of animals start to show up, like the bobwhite quail that I think a lot of us miss hearing the bobwhite quail for years in North Carolina. I'm assuming that you get to hear them on a regular basis now.
Yes, so the incorporation or creating co-inhabitants for wildlife, planting hedgerows and planting trees on cutover, and also planting cover crops in the fall, have all helped with creating wildlife opportunity there. Not only do you see a lot of quail, you see all other kinds of native birds that are coming back to the land, which is real cool to me.
Yeah, are you starting to hear the whippoorwills again?
Oh yeah, whippoorwills, woodpeckers, various types of woodpeckers, and bluebirds. The North Carolina bluebirds are in abundance in my county.
So, you grew up on a farm and you were immersed, in nature as a child. And you could have gone into any number of, fields after your career with the federal government, and even you could have come back to the farm and continued down this conventional path. Do you think there was anything about that connection with nature that you had developed as a child that made you kind of feel like, this is something that we need to look after?
Yes, so having the opportunity to be inherited the amount of land that I was able to inherit, and being the next son that was willing to be a producer, I felt like that coming back to that land was just the most peaceful place compared to all the other places that I have been. Also, I didn't want to skip my generation on farming and hoping that the next generation would pick up. There's an education piece there to understanding the soul, and I wanted to make sure that I would be alive to carry that tradition over to the next generation.
So you talked a lot about the regenerative strengths of growing industrial hemp. What do you think the largest barrier now is to prevent other farmers from growing industrial hemp?
So I would say the biggest barrier is not enough decorticators. Decorticator is just like a textile mill that's separating the fiber from the herd to create the end product. We don't have enough infrastructure there. Currently right now, I think we only have one decorticator in North Carolina that is in full-fledged operation. So we need more companies to invest in decorticators so that more farmers can farm industrial hemp and incorporate that into their current program.
And you were sharing last night that some of your product is going to Canada for the insulation industry?
Yes, so in the textile and manufacturing industry, you have end-use products like insulation. that can be made for new home construction. You also have wood replacements or additives that industrial hemp hurd can be added to create non-combustible products that can also go into homes. You also have automotive industry that are utilizing the panels in vehicles such as BMW as an example that are utilizing hurd material, and also satellites as well as SpaceX, just to name a company that's utilizing hemp hurd into their satellite panels.
Wow, because lightweight and strong.
Yep, yeah, and strong, correct.
So you mentioned
Low
automotives. I'm fairly certain that Henry Ford had an idea, when he first was thinking about,
Yes.
his idea to develop the car industry. He thought he could grow cars, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that instead of the carbon fiber product, I know that industrial hemp hurd is also an alternate for that.
So I know that there's, a lot of emotion around government subsidies, but what role do you think the government really needs to play in the regenerative agriculture space?
Well, I think that the government should lean less on subsidy bailout for farmers. We don't like subsidies, we like better markets. I think having a better market that we can control means more than a subsidy. Because if we have a market to grow and sell into, we wouldn't have to have a need for subsidy. So the government should play a key role in maintaining the market so that the supply chain will not be deterred.
Yeah. So in your community in Warren County, you've been doing this for a while, and I know that you know probably every farmer in the county. How's it rubbing off on them? Are they coming to you and say, hey, I want to learn a little more about this?
Yeah, so a lot of farmers around me are a lot older than me. They're more set in their ways, more traditional. They actually like to see new innovation, and they like to see things being done differently, but they want to see you do it instead of them giving in. So a lot of times the older farmer will stop by and say, hey, where's your market for all of this that you have here? And, I don't try to retain information, I try to explain, the aspect of where this can end up. And that kind of makes them think, well, if he's successful at it, then I can be too. And it's all about helping your neighbor, and I still believe in that. But a lot of farmers, to be honest, are really just getting out of farming, to be honest, in my area. And then we also dealing with a lot of development, corporate development, and solar farms, which we've been talking about for the last couple of days, and data centers that are being built on farmland in my area. And that's kind of becoming an issue on the political side, as well as the redevelopment and zoning as well.
Well, speaking of technology, you integrate a lot of technology on the farm. Can you share some of that? Because that probably appeals to the younger farmers.
Yes, so we try to really show the youth, that the labor aspect of farming is not all that they see. So we kind of try to train and show and provide demonstrations for precision agriculture equipment that we use on our tractors and our harvesters. We also utilize drones to spray fungicide on crops that we cannot reach, or that are just faster to apply and saves us time for having to be in the field. And GIS systems as well, and also agronomy analysis for soil testing. There are so many various tools that can be utilized to show the next generation of producers that it's not all just labor intensity. It's actually some cool stuff that we can actually do on the farm. And then we also bring in AI. I spoke earlier today about how AI has been a good thing for farmers like myself that don't like to do math or don't like to focus on chemistry. AI just allows us to get the results a lot faster. And with getting the results a lot faster, it also saves us time. But it's some things that AI are not good at. We also need to be able to research those things ourselves.
Yeah. So I have one more question for you before you ask the audience to give them the opportunity to ask questions. So you get interviewed a lot. Is there a question nobody ever asked you, or are there some parting thoughts you'd like to tell everyone here tonight?
I don't know about the questions. I mean, I get asked all kinds of questions. I don't mind answering them the best way I can. But I really want to hit home with trying to find your closest farm operation to your home and really subscribing to some of the products that they're able to sell to you directly. It means a lot, whether you're raising animals and you want natural feeds, or you want to have a healthy portion of fruits and vegetables in your home. A community-supported agriculture program means a lot to the producer because we're guaranteeing that we're providing you a healthy option of food that would be available to you every week. I don't think there's any other system better than that to be able to at least provide a subscription to you. And those that can't afford it, you could also donate to a family of need that way as well. So we utilize a lot of our local churches and nonprofits to subscribe to our services as well to be able to give back to those of need.
Great, thank you. So we have a mic on either aisle, and if anybody has a question, please come up to the mic and ask away. We can't see you very well.
Yes, they like it.
All right, let's see. Is it on? Good.
Yes.
Thank you, Patrick. My name's Noah Upchurch. I really enjoy going to the farmers market here in Salisbury. We have a great one at the Rail Walk. And in buying all this local stuff, I realized, sitting here listening to you tonight, I actually don't know that much about Rowan County farms. So I just wanted to share a little bit because I was interested. The USDA county farm census, and it's a little old, it's from 2017. But we have identified in this survey 1,482 farmers in Rowan County. 15 of them responded to the survey that they were Black or African American, out of 1,482. 97% were family farms. It has a thing on here that says farm organically, and it is left completely blank. My question for you is there something that we can do better and more regenerative for our soybean farmers? Because out of about 60,000 crop acres here in Rowan County, in 2017, 22,591 were used for soybeans. And thanks to a very generous program offered here at Catawba, I get a New York Times subscription. Last month, I saw this headline and was a little bit scared. China bought $12.6 billion in U.S. soybeans last year. Now, because of retaliatory tariffs, it's zero, right? So 1/3 of Rowan County farmers making this product, and the biggest purchaser of soybeans is no longer buying our soybeans. Is there something that our farmers here in Rowan County could do? Do they need to all switch to hemp? Or is there some other practice that they could adopt to help us be insulated from these market conditions?
Well, I don't know if the political correct thing to say to that, but I'm gonna say it anyway. They're dependent on the person that put us in that situation to help us out, and that's President Trump. Because going into the 2025 farm year, when we were all planting soybean, we expected that China would be at least the #2 buyer of our soybeans in 2025. But because of the tariffs that were put into place, it has made it difficult to export that crop. The last survival opportunity in that trade situation or tariff situation was that there was a $60 billion purchase that was spent with Argentina that would have recovered some of that percentage for us soybean producers to be able to sell that crop. When that transaction was made, China took that amount of soybean and purchased it from Argentina with those dollars that we utilize for as taxpayer dollars. That $60 billion could have came to us as farmers, and the government could have purchased that soybean and then resold that soybean to another country. But instead, it didn't play out the way that he wanted it to play out. So we're in the situation that we are in now. I have planted over 250 acres of soybean, and I don't have anywhere to sell it. However, what I did before this even took place was, while I was planting soybeans, I was building grain bins also to protect the farm in case of a situation like this, because I knew that it was so much political rhetoric going back and forth with our #1 purchaser of soybean in the U.S. There are farmers that don't have the opportunity that we did to be able to build those grain bins that are going to suffer drastically. What can be done is that the government has to send a subsidy to those producers that can't sell, or they have to invest in corporate companies that are willing to crush that soybean and create oil that can be utilized here in the U.S., because unfortunately there just is not a market. So that's my truthful answer, and I try to try to stay out of politics. But as a farmer, there's really no good answer to what's going to happen. It's just too much uncertainty. And those statistical facts that you gave are very true. I think you were quoting for Rowan County, correct? That's here in Salisbury. So compare that to other counties that don't have any minority producers farming soybean at all. It's very slim.
Hi, I'm Dottie Hoy. I'm affiliated with a group here called Bread Riot, and our whole purpose is to support local farmers and to get produce to people in need and to the community. Many of our farmers here have CSA subscriptions that you can get involved with. You can also come to the farmers market every Saturday morning from about April through December, including this coming Saturday morning. I'm aware of 3 local farmers who are basically organic. As you know, it's really hard to be certified organic, so they are basically organic, and they come to the farmers market. We have 2 or 3 young farmers who work together. I think they're brothers, who are really into regenerative now, and they're just starting to do this, and they're organic, and they are going gun-ho, so they're doing really well with that. We work with 7 or 8 different farmers in the county, produce farmers, but there are also beef farmers who free range and pork, as well as lots and lots of chickens and eggs here. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on, and we need to get the word out that there's a lot of good farmers in our area that need to be supported. So
Absolutely.
thank you for being here. When you were speaking, you referred just briefly to the problem with heirs. Could you say more about what that is? Because that's really a complicated thing.
Yes, so heirs property has really affected the minority family due to the fact that wills were not in place correctly. And a lot of times when there's a lot of siblings, they will portions of land instead of one sibling being willed a portion of land, and then they pass it on legally with the will per like a tract or acre. And it's a traditional way that minority families have been passing land down for over 50 to 60 years. Say if it's a family that has 8 siblings and they will will 100 acres amongst those 8 siblings, each of the 8 siblings has a percentage. If one person out of those 8 siblings decide that they want to sell their interests, it forces the rest of the 7 siblings to have to sell their land, or either that one person that wants to sell needs to buy all of their interests away from those other 7. And if that doesn't happen and they don't agree to doing that, then someone from the outside can come in and force a sale or probate and cause them all to lose that 100 acres. I hope I explained it correctly.
Yeah, it's incredible you shared earlier that your family has 4 generations of intact wills in place that were handed down. For
Yes.
those that haven't read more about your story or heard you speak about this, can you tell them about the plantation and kind of what the background and how you came to purchase it back again?
Yes, so my great-grandfather was born at the Oakley Grove Plantation, where he was enslaved along with his mother and his 6 siblings. And in 2021, I was able to obtain that plantation, including the shelters around the property. It was 7,000 acres at the end of the Civil War in 1865. What I was able to purchase was the property and 2.5 acres that was left. And so I purchased the property from the North Carolina Historic Preservation Society or Authority, and it had covenants for to refurbish the property. And so I had to agree to those covenants in order to renovate. And so it was an opportunity I didn't want to turn down. The goal for that property is to renovate it into a bed and breakfast, or either and also a wedding venue, and also a place where we can host family gatherings as well. So that would be the purpose of that property. There was a documentary that was advertised about the property and my family called Legacy Regenerated on YouTube. That was sponsored by Patagonia. So if you want to learn more about the property and the renovation program of how we plan to do it, please take a look at that video. It's called Legacy Regenerated.
And there's a book as well, right? So there's the history of the plantation owner's family and then your history, and you brought
Yes.
those 2 stories together.
Yes, it also is a book written by Jim Clark called Coming to Vaughn, which is published online. You all can also download that book. That is by Jim Clark. He is a former professor at UNC Chapel Hill, who's also a resident of Warren County.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Hoy. I'm related to this lady over here who just spoke. I grew up on a very unproductive farm in Wisconsin, but I remember as a boy my father talking to the USDA people, and we had a hill, and so we figured out ways to do contour strip farming across that hill to stop the direct erosion. My question for you, and to inform everybody in the audience here and online, if it's a big if. I'm well past retirement, but if I were a young man and I wanted to get hold of a piece of property, maybe say 100 acres, and start doing the kinds of things that you are doing, and I have a job making a decent salary, say 75,000 a year, etc., and a wife that's working, and how much money would it take to buy 100 acres and start getting a hold of equipment, probably used equipment, which is what we did on our farm back in the late 40s and early 50s. What kind of cost are we talking about to just get a start in, per acre? What does farmland cost? And what kinds of equipment is needed to do the various kinds of farming that you're proposing or talking about?
Great question. If you don't mind, I'll use my area as price per capita based on acreage. in my county, land is going for $13,000 an acre on average for farmland. That's farmland, non-residential. To practice regenerative agriculture, you're going to have to either purchase used equipment if you want to save money and utilize that equipment to be set up based on how you want to regenerate the land. Or if you purchase brand new equipment, it's going to be very costly for a person that's just getting into agriculture. But the most cost is going to be your land. That's going to be your highest cost. So on average right now in my county, it's around $13,000 an acre for cropland. Is that? Well, my advice for the young next generation of producers is to work on an existing farm under a farm that looks like eventually they're not going to be farming long, and that they can lease that land from that farmer to the point where there's an option to buy. In some cases, a portion of that land could be willed to that person that's a good steward, because the landowner may see that that person values that land like they did when they were farming it. And I've seen those success stories myself from either the Midwest as well as the eastern part of the U.S. Because some children do not want to farm, and that's okay. It's not a problem. But give the next person that's willing to step up an opportunity to purchase that's just as invested in the soil as that farmer that's going out on retirement. Because it is not a way that you could just purchase that amount of land due to how much it costs. The USDA does have a land purchase program that you can borrow up to $500,000 to be able to purchase land. There is a program that is available for a new farmer, a new and beginning farmer. However, of course, that land will be held under collateral until they're able to pay it off. But that process is going to be your best interest rate compared to a commercial lender.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for being here at Catawba College with us and spending so much time. And I know you're super busy and got to get back to the farm. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.